All right, well, welcome everyone as we have a few of our attendees that are joining us as we go along. My name is Charles Googe. I'm president of the Tennessee Association of Museums, and we're very fortunate today to have Chris Grisham with us today to do a presentation for us on improving teacher communication and field trip preparation. Chris serves as the K through 12 education manager at the Tennessee State Museum and is also our illustrious professional programs chair here on the TAM board. So it has got a lot of perspective and ideas about how to facilitate between the teachers as well as between the institutions in making smooth field trip visits and things to look for and other tips and tricks for you. Also joining us is Debbie Shaw, our TAM State Coordinator Extraordinaire, who will be taking any questions we have. As we go along, if you'd like to just pop them in the chat there, you can ask your question. And then once Chris gets concluded, we'll address those questions that anyone may have. And for anyone out there that'd like to watch this after the fact as well, we will be recording our webinar today for your benefit and review after the fact. So as we begin, just a brief note of our mission of the Tennessee Association of Museums is to empower Tennessee museums to inspire, engage, and connect to their audiences and communities. And through programming and outreach, that's a great way for us to further the museum mission out in the community, and as well as bring the community into each of our respective museums through the programming element. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris Grisham and let him take the wheel there. Chris?
All right, thank you. Like Charles said, going to be talking a little bit about some things that we're trying out here at the Tennessee State Museum to try and help improve some of our communication with teachers that are scheduled to use our services. And this won't be super long. I'd like for it to be a little more casual. So feel free, please put any questions, comments, share some of the things you guys do in the chat. I would really like for this to be a great chance for all of us to kind of pick up things from each other that can help us with this. But as we go through, like I said, I want to focus mostly on things that we do as far as communication with teachers that we already have, that have signed up for a field trip or using some of our services, things like that. Not necessarily talking about like, oh, how do I communicate with teachers that we don't reach, or advertising, that kind of stuff. That can be a different talk for a different person that's a little more involved in that. But we're trying some new stuff here at the museum, which is kind of what led me to think, oh, it's like, well, that's what we do here at TAM. We're sharing ideas, seeing what other people are trying out, seeing what could work for other people. So we're trying some new stuff. So I thought, might as well talk about it a little bit. But really I guess to start, I'm going to go back to kind of the beginning and the basics of how we communicate with teachers once they have scheduled a field trip. So our field trip process is probably very similar to most of yours. We get teachers that will either call, email, or fill out a form we have online to sign up for a field trip. And one of the complicating factors for us is we have the Tennessee State Museum facility with its educational programming and various things, and then we also have the Tennessee State Capitol that we handle as well. So we have two different buildings. Some teachers like to do those as completely separate field trips. Some teachers like to pair them together as one trip. And so we do have a lot of information about both of those buildings that we have to share. But once we kind of get them in and they're scheduled and they're on our calendar, that's where we try to start with basic communication, and all the way to the very first thing that we do after we get them scheduled is a confirmation, and that is a confirmation letter with like, hey, we have you down for this date, this program. And, here's some basic pieces of information that you're going to need to get ready for your field trip, whether that's parking information, what they need to do with their lunches, any security information they may need possibly. And for a long time in the building that we used to be in, the building we're currently in, we've been opened in 2018. But the building that we were in before that was there for, 30 years. And we kind of started relying, I think, on our repeat teachers that were very familiar with the field trip process. So we would give them basic information, but that was kind of it. We stopped with the confirmation letter. We're like, oh, they've been here. They know what they're doing. They know how to plan for a field trip. And that worked. A lot of our teachers were repeat teachers, or, somebody at least on their staff that's coming on the field trip had been there before and was familiar with it. So our confirmation letters were fine. It gave the bare minimum piece of information they needed. It was short, it was readable, it was something that they could, kind of consume very quickly. And, they could move on with that. And of course, we always encourage them to call us with questions about their field trip if they come up with any that's not covered. But what happened is we moved into this new building. So we had a new set of instructions. We had new facilities. We had new programming. We had just a new way of doing field trips entirely. So even our long-term teachers that were familiar with us for years and years were no longer familiar with how we did things. So we were getting, we came up with a new confirmation letter that was very similar to our old one, but, it adapted for the new stuff. But we were getting teachers that were showing up and they were very nervous. They're going into a place they'd never been. And, you guys are familiar. Nervous teachers don't make for very organized teachers. Sometimes that causes some more issue at the front end and it makes it a little harder to get the field trip up and going. Usually, they calm down once they kind of see what's happening. But if they've never been to the space, if they've never been on that type of field trip, they don't know what to expect. And some teachers will overcompensate by over organizing, which honestly sometimes can be even worse than under organizing if they don't let you kind of take the reins. Or they would not organize at all and assume, it's like, okay, we'll figure it out when we get there. So we were starting to have these groups that were causing some confusion on their end, and we were causing confusion on their end, and it was causing confusion on our end. It was taking a while to get their field trip started, and it's just not the best way to kick a field trip off. Like that's not the best first impression. So the first thing we did was we started putting more information in the confirmation letters, things that teachers were asking us like, oh, well, I didn't know this, or I wasn't sure about that. It's like, okay, well, we'll add that to the confirmation. We were collecting that up. And if we had a couple of teachers that would tell us the same thing, we're like, okay, well, that's information obviously they want. So we put that in. Then we put the next piece of information in. Then we put the next piece of information in. And eventually what we got were teachers that were not reading the confirmation letter at all because it had become so long. It was very labor intensive. Instead of being able to just very quickly pick out the pieces that they needed, they were actually having to read through because there was so much stuff in it. And that creates the opposite problem, right? They are still coming not prepared. They're still coming maybe a little confused, even though we are giving them tons of information. About the only thing that really does for us is it kind of covers us if they come in and say, well, I didn't know that. And we can be like, well, do you have your confirmation letter? It was in there. But, that's obviously not a place we want to get to. But it did cover us a little bit. So what we ended up doing, we spent almost a year basically going back and forth. We'd add stuff to the confirmation letter, and then people would say, oh, it was too long. I didn't even look at it. So we'd cut stuff out. And then we'd start getting questions about that stuff we cut out. So we'd add it back in. So we had this kind of constantly fluctuating confirmation letter with a lot of information. And it's still, to be honest, I would say too long. I'm actually going to share a screen with a template for you guys that shows you kind of what we're doing. Now, this is the worst case scenario of a confirmation letter that we have because it will cover a group that's coming to the museum and to the Capitol as well, which are two complete sets of instructions. But let's see if I can pull this up. Debbie, I think you may have to give me permission possibly to share. So what I'll show you is kind of the template that we use, like I said, that we send to the teachers immediately as soon as they're on the calendar. All right. There we go. Thank you, Debbie. And I assume you guys can see, yeah, it looks like you guys can all see that. So this is for the Capitol and the Tennessee State Museum, and starts off with the basics. Hello, we plug in the group name. Thank you for scheduling your visit, the date, the time that they're coming, the number of students they told us, the number of adults, and then we actually list the programs that they're going to do at the museum. Which ones did you sign up for out of all the ones that they had as options? Please let us know if you have any questions. Contact us here. Or if anything in this confirmation doesn't look right to you, give us a call. This is one thing we did add, share this information with all the team members. We would end up with groups that, for whatever reason, somebody got sick, somebody broke a leg, some all kinds of situations. The person who scheduled the field trip ended up not coming on the field trip, and none of the teachers knew what was happening. So we were like, hey, by the way, share all of this with any teacher that might be here just in case. So first thing we do is we start with the Capitol, what happens there, where do you put your buses, which at the Tennessee State Capitol is a bit of requires some explanation. A lot of people cannot visualize that, especially if they haven't been to downtown Nashville. What to do when they arrive, what their adults and chaperones need to do, because especially for security purposes at the Capitol, that is a different situation than the kids coming in. We do have to share some things about the Capitol building specifically. We do put in restrooms because there are very few at the Capitol. And that's just the Capitol part of their field trip. Then we jump into the museum. We basically have to do the same thing because the information is different. What to do when you arrive, where your buses can park, where your parent cars can park, basic museum policies, our restrooms. What do you do about lunch at the facility? And if you schedule a scavenger hunt, what does that look like? And we do have some printable, downloadable things that they can do there. So that is a long confirmation. Now, obviously, if they just do the Capitol, we only give them that portion. If they just do the museum, we only give them that portion. And this is kind of what we've settled on as a good length for us, I think, right now. It does hit the big parts, and we just kind of highlight and put headings on. So if the thing you're concerned about is where your buses go, just go straight to that if you know how to do everything else. But we still end up with teachers that either didn't read the whole thing, didn't do that. So we still kind of go back and forth on, we were kind of meeting. We've had a couple of groups that came in and that were a little confused. So we were like, okay, well, what else can we do? Obviously, we can't just keep changing our confirmation letter over and over again. And it did hit again after COVID. I will say we had we had a big shift in teachers that were unfamiliar with the new building when we opened it. And then after COVID, what we found is just a lot of new teachers that had never, it wasn't necessarily our building. It was just that there were a lot of new teachers in the field, or we were getting teachers that we had never gotten as field trips before. So we took that as kind of an opportunity to see what we needed to change to help improve that communication and help just improve their experience, because really it's a customer service thing. If they're confused and nervous when they get here, they're not going to have as pleasant of a time. We want everything to be as smooth as possible. We want them to arrive happy and excited about the field trip. Plus, to be honest, makes it way easier on us, on our staff as well, just on our side of it. So, we collected some comments from the teachers. What kind of stuff did they need to know? What stuff did they feel like it would have made it better if they knew ahead of time? We told them informally and formally. And kind of what we did recently, starting last year, I did this, is I implemented a field trip preview day on a Saturday. I do 2 of them a year, one in the fall, early September, and then one January-ish in the spring. And what we do is literally it's scheduled for 3 hours. It's a Saturday. I send it out to anybody who has scheduled a field trip already that is already coming after that date. And we also kind of advertise it as hey, are you thinking about a field trip to the museum? Come on in, see what it looks like, see if that's what you'd like to do. But we started at 9 o'clock. We run through 12. It's very casual. We have some, donuts and bagels and breakfast stuff, and we just kind of sit and chat for a little while when the teachers first get there and make sure everybody's comfortable talking to each other and asking questions, because that's really what we want. And then we literally will walk them through an entire field trip. We go out and stand where the buses pull in, and we're like, okay, here's how you arrive. And we even go back and give suggestions on things they can do in the classroom, like, hey, again, share this information with your teachers, share this information with your bus drivers, because we don't have direct communication with them. Make sure you have contact information for your bus drivers. We've had situations where they go and have lunch, and you're trying to get back on the bus and it's locked, and nobody has a phone number. So what we do is, like, we will literally walk them through, like, your students will unload here. Your students will then meet with our staff. Our staff will be here. We'll get you in a line. We're going to lead you into this space. We will give the manners. We will then let you divide your group up into smaller groups. We will take them. We will do the programs. If you're doing these programs, this is what we do. If you're doing a scavenger hunt, this is what that looks like. And we actually walk them literally through the whole thing. We come back down. Okay, so your programs are over. Do you want to go to lunch? If so, this is where you will go. This is how that works. Uh, we already have your lunches stored. We showed you where those go. If you are leaving, this is where you go. That kind of thing. And like I said, we put in suggestions, things that we have found that other schools and teachers do to help organize that work really well. Some of our teachers come, it's always helpful if your chaperones know which kids are assigned to them before they get here. If you're dividing up into chaperone groups. Also, again, have a contact list that either you can give to your parents or somebody has that has anybody who would be important. Uh, you know, make sure they're accessible throughout the field trip. We've had schools that come and the weather was perfectly fine here in Nashville, but back home at their school district, they had a severe storm and they ended up canceling school. So everybody had to load their bus and go back just instantly and drop that. Well, if you can communicate with everybody, that's going to make that a lot easier. But we allow the teachers to ask questions. And as we walk them through, and like I said, it's a very casual thing. So we've done this as an advertisement again for anybody who's just curious about the museum field trips and what they look like. Come in, you'll get a chance to kind of see what it does. But we had teachers come in that were already scheduled that were just curious, that were like, hey, I really want this to work. I want this to be smooth. I want smooth sailing all the way through. So we're going to come see this. And that has really worked. It's not the most well attended thing that we do. Obviously, it's just for those teachers. But again, it's 3 hours. It only requires one of our staff people to do this, to answer those questions. And even though the first one that we did, we had about 15 teachers show up for, which was great. That was a little more than I was even expecting. But honestly, several of those teachers, they took what they saw in that and they went back to their school and they organized accordingly. And when they showed up for their field trip, it went perfectly. They had their groups already divided up. They knew exactly where they were going. They knew how to get where they were going. They knew what to lead to us. They knew what they needed to organize. And those were some of the smoothest field trips we've had in a very long time, because they took those lessons that they learned and came and went back and organized their field trip accordingly. We've only done 3 of these. We did the 2 last year, and I did 1 early this year. And again, the attendance has been everywhere from 7 to, like I said, 15, I think. But even if it just helps one school of 120 kids have a much easier field trip, then that works for me. And those teachers can also go back and tell other teachers at their schools, like, oh, hey, if you go to the museum, here's some things you need to do. So we're hoping that helps spread. So that's something new that we've been implementing that seems to be paying dividends so far, but it allows us that extra piece of communication, an extra piece of service for the teachers.
Hey, Chris, we've got a question
Yes.
asking if you do a Saturday meeting for teachers like remotely as well.
That is the other thing. I love a great transition question. That is the other thing that we tried. So the downside for us, because our mission is to serve the entire state of Tennessee. So there is a lot of teachers that come that are not going to come down here on a Saturday. They're 2 hours away. So they're not going to do that for 3 hours on a Saturday. So that's the downside to the in-person one. It tends to be mostly local teachers, Davidson County or the surrounding counties that will actually come to that. Which is, again, great. It helps them. But what do you do about those teachers that are farther out? So the other thing that I've started doing, and I started this last year as well, is a monthly virtual office hour. The last Monday of every month from 3 to 4, I get onto, we use Teams, but I get onto Teams. I send an email to every group that has scheduled a field trip for the next month. And I just say, hey, from 3 to 4, very casually, I am here for questions. It is literally just an office hour. If you have a trip coming up, if you're scheduled in the next month, then log in, ask your question. I will answer it, and you can log out as soon as you're done. It's not like a big formal thing. They don't have to stay for the entire hour. So that's what I've been doing for remote teachers or teachers that are farther out. That has worked very well. We may have 30 or 40 groups scheduled, say next month. For example, I just did September's for October, not that long ago. The September 30th was the last Monday of the month. So the week before that, or the Friday before that, I sent out the email with the link and I was like, hey guys, all of you guys are scheduled for a field trip next month. If anybody has any questions, Monday from 3 to 4, I will be on this link through Teams. Very casual, jump in, ask any questions you might have. Feel free to slide out. If you don't have any questions, don't feel like you need to do this. I tried to make sure it was very voluntary. But that's what I did for remote. And, out of, I think we had 35 groups that had scheduled that I emailed, and 4 teachers logged in. They asked very quick questions, but those 4 teachers were able to take care of some of that concern, some of that worry they had. It is almost always parking. So actually what I've started doing with it, parking is one of their biggest things, because if they don't come down to the museum, downtown Nashville, not familiar with it, especially the ones that are doing this remotely, that can be overwhelming for some. So what I've actually started doing, I'm going to share again, is I just pull up Google Maps of the Tennessee State Museum, and I just have that ready, because one of the first questions I'm going to get is like, hey, where do we park when we get there? And I can zoom in and say, okay, here's the museum. When you arrive, we have a drop off. That's where you're going to drop your students off. That's also where you're going to park your buses. It goes right there. And I will even drop the little guy and make a street view so they can see what the building looks like. If you're going to have lunches, we only have outdoor lunch facilities. Those are right here. There are picnic tables right underneath this pergola. You can put your kids there. That's where your lunches will be. We're also right next to the state park. If you want to go there and have a picnic outside, you can do that. If you are coming to the Capitol, I'll scroll over here and I can show them exactly where they're parking. They're parking on MLK Boulevard, right beside the Capitol on this lane. Kids will come up the stairs and go up there. So I've gotten to where I just automatically have Google Maps pulled up, because that is the biggest bulk of the questions. Some of them have questions that are very specific to their field trip. I had a teacher that had signed in and was signed up for particular programs. And she was like, hey, I just want to know a little bit more about what you're going to be talking about during those programs. I think she'd signed up for a Reconstruction in Tennessee program. She's like, what exactly are the topics that you're going to be talking about? And I kind of walked through the highlights that we hit on that. So, and she was able to ask questions. I've had teachers that needed to make changes to their field trip. They're like, hey, we decided we do want to have lunch. Is there a way we can do the lunch after the programs and then come back for the scavenger hunt? And I've made adjustments to their actual scheduled field trip right there. But that has been really helpful. And for the amount of time and effort that we have to put into that, is almost nothing. The last hour of the day on a Monday, and if nobody logs in, which I haven't had yet, I can be doing other things. I'm answering emails, I'm doing other things. And then, if somebody logs in for a question, I address it, and then I can go back to doing my thing. So it's such a low buy-in on our end. It doesn't take a lot of staff time, doesn't take a lot of effort, doesn't pull me away from really hardly any other things that I'm doing at that particular time. But it helps the teachers. And, like I said, if out of 30 groups, 3 or 4 teachers, that's 10% of our visits are going to be a little bit smoother because of that. Or they will get a question answered, like I said, that's very specific to their program, that we can, that may make the difference of whether or not they, like with the Reconstruction program, whether or not she kept that or changed it to a different program if it didn't hit the standard she was looking to hit. So that's really what we've been doing for remote teachers as well. Like I said, I think that has been very good. And the other thing is, we can, again, kind of covering ourselves a little bit. It's very, like, we've also had a kind of a drop of any teacher saying like, well, I didn't know that, or how am I supposed to know that? It's like, well, you know what? You got the confirmation letter. We do these semester-long visits to the field trip, and we do offer this office hour once a month to everybody who comes. So it's like there's lots of different opportunities, whichever is easiest for them to take advantage of, they can do that. So we can hit them different ways. And doing the virtual office hours, I have had teachers that did come to the walkthrough, but they came up with a new question. So they'll still come into the office hour. Um, as of right now, I just do it for the next month. So the teachers that have scheduled for the next month, I don't like necessarily open them up to everybody because I don't want to get too far ahead necessarily. But that may be something that I change if it starts to become more popular, more used. I may be like, okay, I'll just send it out for the next 2 or 3 months, maybe the next semester, and you can come to any of these office hours that happen to be before your field trip. So that's something we may look at expanding possibly, but as of right now, I just do it for the following month. Any questions so far? Those are kind of the two big new things that we've introduced over the last little bit to help kind of improve our communication with teachers.
And I will say, if you don't like using the chat, if you guys want to unmute yourself, you should be able to. There's not a
Yeah, feel
lock on
free.
it. So feel free.
I see no unmutes. I've explained everything so thoroughly so far that there's no possible questions that could be asked. Excellent. So basically kind of how it's going so far. Like I said, we've been doing these for a little while now. Uh, honestly, I think they're very successful. And success means different things depending on what it is, right? The virtual office hours, I think, have been very successful, even though we only get 3 to 4 teachers per one of these. But for the very little amount of work I actually have to put into that. And sometimes the question they ask is just say, hey, by the way, can we eat lunch inside the building? No, we have outdoor lunch facilities. That is all they had. The only question they had. They're like, oh, great, thanks. And then they log off and slide out. So for this such a low amount of work that actually goes into that, I feel like that has been very successful to smooth out some of these field trips as they arrive. The walkthroughs have been great. The teachers that have come to those, their field trips have been so much smoother when they get here, which, not only enhances their experience, but like I said, it just makes it a lot easier on our staff if they already know what to expect. So even though they're kind of low buy-in as far as, we don't do this for every single teacher. It's not 100% for those new things. It's really, really helped the people that it's helped. And it's just a great customer service aspect to say, like, look, we're here for you. Once a month, I'm literally online. You guys can just talk to me.
Do you guys have all of that arranged on your, like on the website or something they could access, like without having to go into the Zoom or into the Teams meeting or anything like that?
Sort of. So the walkthrough is actually listed on our kind of PD page where we offer like here's the things that we offer for teachers as far as trainings go. We put the walkthroughs on those for people to sign up for ahead of time. So far, what we have done is for the office hour is I am emailing it directly out to the teachers just because that's generally something that I don't know how beneficial it would be for somebody who is not already scheduled. But that is actually a conversation that we've had is like, should we just put these links up on the website? And anybody who has a question about possible future field trips, like, hey, do I want to go to the museum as a field trip? They could get in and ask. That would be the benefit I would see to posting them publicly. We just haven't done it yet. So as of right now, it's by invitation.
Okay. One more question came in. Do you have any materials for teachers to share with their classes to help prepare their students for field trips?
What we're about to do next, so that's kind of our next phase, and some of you may already do this, but videos, video confirmation basically. And what we're going to try to do is take some of that information that's in their written confirmation about where to park and all that, and provide a visual aspect to that through a video of like, oh, as your buses come up. And we're in the planning phases of that now. We're writing up a script and everything and getting some B-roll, and we're currently making that. The idea for the video is to be something that not only would teachers be able to use, but we would like for them to be able to show it to students prior to the field trip. And what that would have is not only would the students know, like, oh, hey, there's the building, I saw that. So I know we're about to get off the bus or whatever. But it would have things in there like, hey, where are the restrooms located? So, I mean, obviously we'll still say that when the kids get there, but if they know where the restrooms are located, you're hierarchy of needs is taken care of right off the bat. And it would also have the museum rules of like, hey, you cannot have food in here, turn the flash off on the camera, things like that. So what we're trying to do with the video is make that something that would not only be useful for the teachers, but that's something they could share with the students and give them a heads up before their field trip. So that's actually our next step. Any other questions?
Right. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you, Chris, so much for your presentation. And I want to remind everybody that we're going to be trying to do these TAM webinars. Chris is actually in charge of this webinar program that he's trying to get out to everybody monthly. Next month on November 20th is going to be, oh my goodness, I just forgot. It has to do with the awards, how to
Crafting
craft.
the perfect award submission, something like that.
Yes. With our wonderful awards chair, Tori Mason. That'll be November 20th. The link to register for that will go live probably here in the next few days. So we'd love to see you there. And Charles will have this probably up on our TAM YouTube page within the next week or so, in case you want to go back and check it out. But yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Thank you, Chris.
No problem. And I do want to put a plug in for the next one. If any of you are thinking of submitting an award for TAM this year, Tori will literally walk you through. I know sometimes that the award submissions can be confusing, or maybe you have a weird situation and you're trying to figure out how it fits in. She will literally walk through and help with all of that. Thank you guys very much for coming in. If anybody does have anything, feel free to reach out to me or either through TAM or directly, and I'll answer those questions as well.